Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this London Business School webinar. Our topic today is LGBTQ plus life at LBS. So this is really addressed at people who are either considering applying to the school, have already applied, or are generally interested. My name is Peter Johnson. I'm the Senior Admissions Manager for the Masters in Finance. And in 1996, I was one of the founders of the LGBTQ plus network at LBS. And it's great to be able to say that in that 23 years since then, the group's really gone from strength to strength. I'm joined by two of my student colleagues today, and they're going to really give you a flavour for that. But before that, I thought a really good way to kick off was with a quotation from Francois Orteler-Magnier, who's the Dean of London Business School, who said to us, at LBS, we embrace the many dimensions of the diversity of our community. We aspire to enable every individual to feel welcome and be their best. Guided by the research of our faculty and fueled by the energy of our entire community, we strive to be an inspiring example of inclusion. I'm proud of the contribution of the Out in Business Club to shifting gear on inclusion. So I hope that's a good kickoff. And with that, I'm going to ask Allie and Siffrein to introduce themselves.
Hi guys, I'm Allie Fleder. I'm an MBA 2019 student here at LBS, and I'm the president of the Out in Business Club.
Hi everyone, and thank you for tuning in. My name is Siffrein, and I'm one of the global MIM candidates at London Business School and Fudan University in Shanghai. And I was the VP, so sort of head of partnerships this year at Out in Business Club. So the brief overview of the agenda today we'll start with the Out in Business Club itself and look at some general facts and figures of the club. We will then move on to looking at the Year Out Conference, which really is our key event of the year, real highlight of the school year. And then we'll move on to look at LGBTQ life in London, and then we will finish with some questions.
And just to let you know, you can type questions in all the way through the session, and we'll answer as many of them as we can at the end. And a couple of days after the event, we will send you a transcript of this whole presentation, which will include the Q&A as well.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Peter. So our club, since its foundation in 1996, has been growing in size steadily every year. In the year 2015-16, you can see that we had 14 active members. These are LGBT members. And then this year we had 65 active members in the club. Now these are LGBT people in the club. We have a massive group chat that includes not only these active members, but also many of the allies of the school. And we'll talk about this more in depth as we go on. But there's such a big network of people who are non-LGBT, but who are so active in every one of our activities. Many of them came to Year Out this year. So it's been great to partner with them as well. And hopefully this growth will continue in the next few years.
So stepping back about the club itself, as Peter and Sif said, we were founded in 1996, which makes Out in Business one of the oldest LGBT clubs for any top business school. And I think that's why the club is probably so big and active today. We have over 950 plus members. That includes alumni, staff, faculty, and students like Sif and I across all different programs. We also have a number of corporate sponsors for the club who support all of the activity that we do, and we're recruiting our students throughout the year. This year we had over 25 sponsors. Now, in terms of the overall activity or the mission of the club, we're really centered around three things. That's one, the professional development of our members, two, community involvement, and three, social events, kind of bringing everyone together. So in terms of professional development, we really strive to serve as a networking resource for our members. Sif will talk a little bit more about that in a minute. In terms of community involvement, we try to promote greater social interaction and just build empathy by telling stories here on campus and within LBS's broader community, including alumni. And in terms of social events, well, we'll get into more of that, but we try to keep it pretty fun.
fun part. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so looking more in depth at the professional development, this is a business school, and the goal at the end will be to get a job that we like. And so there's many things around the professional development that I want to talk to you about. The first one is the student alumni mentoring, which is in some ways formal and informal. At the beginning of the year and the kickoff for the Arts and Business Club is really early in the year. It's such a great way to jumpstart your journey at RBS and make meaningful connections from the beginning. And I met so many of my closest friends and mentors at the kickoff, actually, which was one of the really fun first events I had at RBS. And personally, I was very interested in consulting opportunities, and many second-year students came up to me and offering me to, so some help, some guidance in terms of how to go about the whole process. And I think we have invaluable resources in the club with current members, but also with alumni. Year Out is obviously one of the biggest events to meet the alumni, but we also have alumni drinks throughout the year, and they just love to come back, and we have such a strong network and relationship with them as well. Then we have the Social Impact Week, which is great because it gives us an opportunity to look at what we can do for the broader community in general. This year we have a really exciting event. It will be called RBS Perspectives, and we'll look at the experiences of some of our members who come from countries that are not as friendly in terms of LGBTQ plus rights. Then we have the company visits, which is obviously a major help in job search. And these companies, they actually all come to us, and they're so eager to meet our members and our current students. So this year, for instance, we had the ones I attended were the one at Bain, BCG. So you go to the office, and it's a great way to make connections in a smaller environment where people are very, very happy to help you. And it's really positive networking. And obviously, yeah.
And what's really cool in terms of these company visits is that again, because of the longer history of the club, the club itself has such deep relationships with a lot of these companies, consulting, tech, financial, that they actually come to us year after year. So they approach us usually at the beginning of the year, asking to do events between their LGBT groups, hosting our students at their offices.
Exactly. And the last point is LGBTQ career fairs. Now, there's one at Year Out, and we will dig into that later. But there's also many, many, many career fairs in London designed specifically for LGBTQ plus students and talent. And, we just get some in our email, and we obviously make the whole club aware of that. So there's a lot of opportunities depending on what you want to do later in life.
So in terms of some of the activity that we do on campus, we have a lot of stuff that we do just within our club, but we also try to, again, engage the broader community. So right from the probably one of the first events of the year at LBS is Coming Out Day. It's in early September, and students from our club, and that includes LGBT students and allies, get up in their classes and they share stories of why they're involved in the club. Of course, it's all voluntary, but it's a way of, again, kind of building empathy and letting their classmates know who they are and a little bit about them, as well as what LGBT rights look like around the world. They pass out stickers that you see there, these ally stickers, and every single student winds up putting them on their name tag. So when you look around in a class throughout the year, you'll see that the person's name and that they're an LGBT ally.
Yeah, we actually ran out of stickers because people wanted them so much. But yeah, and also just a quick one on my personal experience with Coming Out Day. So I come from France, which is quite a friendly country in terms of LGBTQ rights. But even for me, it was quite a big thing to do, to speak out in front of hundreds of people in the class. Well, actually, it was probably about 80, but still quite a few people. And actually, the response to what I said was so overwhelmingly positive, and everyone was coming up to me and asking me questions, and it was a great way to engage and not only talk about my personal story, which is good, interesting, but there's more to it. It's how can we, with these allies and with the broader community, work hand in hand and just have a happier and better world. So it was really, really a meaningful and special day, and if you come to RBS, I'm sure you'll agree with that.
But not all of our events are so emotional. We also do quite a bit of drinking. So there's a big party on campus called Tattoo. I think it's one of the biggest parties of the year, and that involves every single club, whether it's the Israel Club or the Japan Club or the North American Club, coming together and putting on dances and holding performances and bringing their native food. So for some reason for us, that's rainbow Jello shots. So the Out in Business Club is always the most popular booth at Tattoo. We generally have over 1,000 Jello shots from across the rainbow, and it's always the best time. And of course, we also have what we believe is really the best party of the year, which is the White Party. It's where almost all the students come out. We usually have 500 plus attendees. We bring them to a huge gay club in London, and we have all of the really big clubs putting on dances and lip sync. I know we just got cut off. So again, the White Party, it's really the biggest party of the year. We have everyone from the men's rugby club to the women's football team to the military club coming, planning out performances and lip syncs and competing in a huge competition that's judged by some faculty. It's an awesome time.
And I went this year with my husband, and we realised we hadn't been to heaven for 10 years, at least 10 years, and it was an excellent party. Yes.
It's pretty fun. It's pretty fun. It feels like a 12-hour party. So we also do, for most of you, if any of you don't know this, there's a conference in the U.S. called the Ramba Conference, Reaching Out MBA. It's a huge LGBT conference. We always send a delegation of students there, and we subsidize tickets. This year, I think we had somewhere between like 5 and 10 kids going to network for the weekend. We also hold different events throughout the year in partnership with other clubs. We in particular partner a lot with the Women in Business Club. So these last 2 years, we've held an equality ball with them, benefiting UN Women. It's a black tie event that we hold at a really nice members club here in London. And we're about to celebrate a Valentine's event.
Yes.
Love is Love Week. We'll be going to one of our executive committee members' houses to fill little Valentine's gifts with candy and chocolates for all of the students on campus with a note from Mountain Business.
Cool. Love it.
And then there's regular social activities. We have, as Ali just said, we will be going to one of our executive committee's members' houses, but there's plenty of less formal events that we organize in different bars and clubs around London. And so one of our really new events that we had this year was we decided to do a retreat, which happened quite early on in the year, and it was in Brighton. So this was great for 2 reasons. The first one is that it was quite early on, so it was a great opportunity to meet a lot of members in the club that we didn't have the chance to meet, but also make more than just small talk and have long conversations in a house that we rented in Brighton. And so the second reason is Brighton itself is one of I think they like to say that the LGBTQ capital of the UK, and it was a great time. So let's see what we have in store for next year in terms of the retreat. And there's regular club nights as well, and many clubs in London.
And in general, I have to say the support from the school is really incredible. Joining Out in Business at London Business School was my first time ever being part of any kind of LGBT group. And the reason that I joined is because from the very get-go, I found that they were one of the most active clubs on campus, but also just incredibly supported across the school. I remember looking around in my classes and orientation and realizing that we had so many very senior faculty members and teachers who were proudly out, which was incredible to see. So we have support from the faculty. We actually just had a drinks with staff, faculty, and administrators together with our students a couple weeks ago. We have support from the student activities team who gives us some even financial support, but also like staff support on a lot of our different events, including the big conference that we do year out. We have support from the Career Center, who helps us organize some of those like company recruiting events that we do. And we also have the school supports a scholarship, the Reaching Out MBA or Ramba LGBT Fellowship, which is a $20,000 award given every year to lead the way for equality in business education. So our Year Out conference, we've been talking a lot about it. Year Out is the largest LGBT business school conference in Europe, and I actually think the largest LGBT business conference in Europe. We have over 500 people who attend the event, so it's almost all of our students, almost all of our LGBT identifying students, but also a number of allies, but also kids who come from around the world. We have delegations of students who come from most of the top schools in the US and around Europe. And we also have a number of people from London who attend, including especially our alumni who help to sponsor the event.
Yeah, and we have amazing speakers every year who come. Now, in the past, we've had, for instance, Prime Minister of Luxembourg, Xavier Bettel. We've had many other amazing men and women. So this year we had Tiernan Brady, who's the Equality Campaign Director of the Australia Marriage Equality Campaign. And then was also the political director of the Yes Equality Campaign in Ireland, which led to the adoption of same-sex marriage laws in both countries. We had Pippa Dale from BNP Paribas, head of global market roadshows. We had Laura Holliman from Goldman Sachs, Inge Beale, who was one of our keynotes, the former CEO of Lloyd's of London. But we had many other people. And interestingly, in the past, Year Out speakers were very focused on business. And this year we had many activists, we had some from Sri Lanka, we had some from many countries from around the world. So we had a much more global approach and a much more activist approach to the conference as well, especially on the second day.
I think it's worth talking about women's representation on the panel this year, because that was really phenomenal.
Totally, yeah, we did a big push this year to include more women in terms of the agenda and also up the number of female participants in the conference. So we had a record number of females who attended, it was like almost 35%, and we had 50-50 people who identified as female and people who identified as male speaking in the agenda.
Yeah. And as Ali previously mentioned, we had 400 plus students from essentially all the leading business schools in the world. Obviously, a lot of them came from RBS, but some of them came from Columbia, HBS, Wharton, INSEAD, many people from INSEAD, also ESADE in Spain, and others that are not even mentioned on this slide. So it was an amazing opportunity to meet other communities, LGBTQ and allies from different schools around the world and build connections with them as well.
We also have a number of companies who exclusively sponsor Year Out. This year, over 50 sponsoring the event. That included our lead sponsor, BCG, as well as companies like Salesforce and Google, Bain, McKinsey, KKR, Uber, Amazon, and many more. Most of these sponsors come to the career fair of the event. So they're there to really actively recruit. They're not just there from like a branding exercise perspective. They're there really because they want to be hiring these students, whether for summer internships or for full-time.
Let's look at the fun part, LGBTQ plus life in London. Well, it's a secret to no one that London is one of the best cities to experience LGBTQ plus life. Now there's the usual suspects like Heaven, which is one of the biggest LGBTQ plus club in London. But there's many bars, notably in Soho. You'll find a lot of rainbow flags there. And it's just an amazing place to be. And you really feel that you can be yourself, which, it's hard to say in many places in the world, but this is one of the few places where whatever you want to do, you can do. And people in general, always, will not judge. So you feel very free and you feel that atmosphere, that welcoming atmosphere, from the moment you arrive in London.
Can I just say the ballet slide there is Matthew Bourne's production of Swan Lake that I went to see at Sadler's Wells, which is a major dance performance venue in London. And it was first on in London, I think 25 years ago. And it was just amazing. So I think there's certainly that bar scene, but very much a kind of much broader cultural scene in London as well.
And again, I've been able to attend many, many events that are not linked to LBS necessarily. There's many organizations like Out Leadership, Out to Business that regularly organize events, and a couple of us will go every time, and it's really free up to depending on what you have in your schedule. But there's always something happening.
Okay, so that, I hope, gives you a good overview of the club and our activities. Just to remind you, keep on typing in your questions. We've got a few here already. First one up is another Peter who's taking part today, who's asking, what opportunities are there for a club member to involve his or her partner in social and careers activities?
Yes, I can take that one. Peter, we actually have a partner chair for the club, a guy who's probably even more active than his husband is, whose husband is another MBA, 2019. The partners are welcome at all of the events that we do. I brought my fiance over from New York when I came here. And she was very concerned about coming to LBS, and that I would be suddenly involved in this huge in a social life that didn't include her. But she always felt like she's always felt like she had a family and out in business, and that's probably one of the reasons that we both really gravitated towards the club. Whether it was coming to, like, for example, the Year Out conference and recruiting and networking for herself, or coming to the parties and cocktails, pre-games, whatever that we do as a club. Annie, my partner, joins for almost everything, and our partner chair, a guy named David, is really helpful in helping to organize events and also make sure that other partners always feel welcome too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. So another question, what opportunities are there for students to network with LGBT professionals or gain a mentor? So throw that to Siffrein.
Yeah, we already touched upon that point again already previously in the slides, but there's endless opportunities. It's really depending on your personal will to go out there in London and to meet these people in the different events that there are. But within RBS, as mentioned as well, there's many opportunities to network with LGBT professionals. Year Out is obviously probably the biggest moment where you will have an enormous pool of people. But again, you can just reach out to former members of Out in Business on LinkedIn or anywhere else at drinks that we organize. And it's so easy, and everyone is really happy to help. So to be honest, the opportunities are really endless, and it depends on everyone's will to go out there and just take advantage of them.
There's a question on how the school supports the community on campus. And I'm just going to pick up on that quickly. As I said in the introduction, and I mean, the guys have covered this a bit during the presentation, but I was one of the people who initially set up the group in 1996. And I found that the school had always been a very supportive place. I've worked at LBS for nearly 30 years and always been comfortably out gay. But it was just our sense that it needed something a bit more focused and a bit more organised, really, to sort of make manifest and the LGBT presence in the school and kind of mobilise some of that support. And I think what we discovered along the way was, I mean, critically, there were a number of openly gay faculty members and also openly gay senior members of the administration. And just that presence, I think, made the activities of the network so much easier to mobilise. And I'm very conscious, as one of the senior admissions managers, just how much we can reach out to colleagues, whether they're LGBTQ or just allies, and ask for their support. And I think a really good example of that, I mean, for any of you who dialed in later, when you get the transcript for this, I gave a quotation from our dean, and we asked him for his support, and it was given with such enthusiasm, because one of our major current initiatives as a school is shifting the gear on inclusion. And clearly LGBTQ forms a really large part of that. But at the end of the first day at You're Out, Francois spoke, and those speeches can be a bit formulaic, those kind of support speeches. And I was very, very moved by his because I found it so completely heartfelt and really very, very genuine. So it's great to know that, you know, we've got support right from the very top of the organisation.
Yeah, and we should also add that at Year Out, actually, so Year Out is I think I said, is a 2-day conference, and Francois, our dean, spoke and closed the conference on the first day, on the Friday, and after, we have a board for our Year Out conference made up of alumni of the Out in Business Club, and after we did a cocktail reception with our board, and that was sponsored by the dean. And he came and he spoke to our alumni and the students who'd been organizing the conference. And so he wound up spending, I think, almost more than half a day at the Year Out conference. And some of the other clubs on campus, like the Women in Business Club, for example, said to me, "How did you guys possibly get a full half day of the dean's time?
Because we
know
asked.
How busy? Because we've asked too." But it's really just testament to the strong support of the school. And I'll also say that I know again, full credit to you, Peter, but that the long history of the club, I think, has just created this environment that really feels, we're not just paying lip service to this, it really feels inclusive here. So I came from New York. I was very lucky to come from New York, a place that's pretty progressive on LGBT rights, but I wasn't out to a lot of people at my work, and I was not out to a lot of people that I was close to when I was living there. But coming to campus, it was really the first time that I was fully out to my entire community. I myself stood up in my class on coming out week. I volunteered to stand up and to tell my own coming out story. And Sif, I felt exactly like you. It was just incredible. I wound up crying. My whole class came down and hugged me. My finance teacher was hugging me. I mean, it's just such an incredible community here. And the support is really unlike anything I've ever experienced.
Yeah. I would just also add one thing. It's that it's also very, very welcoming to people who do not feel ready to be out yet.
Totally.
And there's many people in our club who are actually, some of them are officers, and they don't feel comfortable being out to the whole community and RBS. Often it's because they come from countries or even families that are not as welcoming. But regardless of what you choose, whether you want to be fully out or still, be still a little bit more.
There's a space for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
There's a space for whatever you want and whoever you are. So
it is really important to stress that people can do things at their own speed. We're not forcing anybody out. Yeah. People find their own levels of comfort all the way through the program, particularly as things progress. And I think it was quite obvious at things like You're Out that gives people an impetus to maybe take the next step.
Yeah.
And maybe that may be the next step with friends and family outside LBS, not just within the LBS context. I've got a question here from Mark from Singapore. So have there been any challenges you've been faced with being out and going through job searches? So in the recruitment space, or has it mostly been a positive experience? And this is quite a fraught question that certainly came out at Year Out this year and in previous years.
Definitely. I'll jump in first. It's a really good question, Mark. So I will say that I've been focused mostly on the kind of between the tech and the finance, sort of the fintech space. Since I've been here, I have only had a positive experience. Actually, the 3 internships now that I've had while I was at London Business School have all come from either alumni or connections through the club. And I think I would say probably the majority of the people in our club are going to, in my year, are going to work full-time or are interning for the summer at some of those sponsors that we have for Year Out, who, again, are really actively recruiting LGBTs wherever they are in the world. That being said, I know we have, for example, someone in our club who is recruiting for private equity, and in that space, I think has had some challenges, especially looking at some of the boutique firms and the way that the way that they've navigated that is by is actually talking to one of the bigger private equity firms that sponsored Year Out, getting advice from them about the best way forward, about interviewing, when to come out. So I think, it's still a fine line to walk in general, and it's particularly difficult in some sectors. But you have a club of people. I know that actually, as I'm saying this, she also, I know, reached out to some alumni who are in private equity, asking them for advice too. So the broader community of Out in Business, both current students and those who've already graduated, is really incredibly helpful and supportive in that process of finding an employer where you can feel comfortable to be however out you want to be at work.
Yeah. So a sort of slightly related question. What is it like to be out at LBS, especially as many students come from parts of the world where being gay is illegal?
I think it's Ali who said that you find a family here, and I think the word welcoming, we've been saying it a lot, but it's really what it feels like. There's about 2,000 people total on campus. Many programs are, coexisting. There's such a big range of ages, of nationalities, and obviously there will be people who come from areas where being gay is illegal. I think one example, which is really interesting, is the timing of our coming out week was really perfect, because it came just after India decriminalized same-sex, basically same-sex relationships. And many Indian students came up to me, and they, we talked about this, and I think they mentioned as well that it's not because a country on paper is LGBT unfriendly, as it were, that everyone in the country is. And I think everyone in RBS shares some traits, and one of them is being very open-minded. Now, I personally haven't had any experience with anyone who's been negative or anything, and I tend to be quite vocal about the activities of the club and talk about Year Out a lot, especially for the first whole semester. So actually, it's really amazing, and I think, in fact, there's a lot you can learn about LGBT communities in countries where it's not legal. For instance, Singapore, there's one of our members who's from there. So in general, it's very good. Again, it's like the job search. You probably have exceptions, but I haven't met any.
I'm just going to jump into another question that's come in that, again, is somewhat related. And this is, how much should I out myself in the application form? And is there any advantage to doing so? And I'm going to answer that in general and then talk about a very specific instance recently. I would say I work alongside people working on all the programs, all the application processes. And I'm totally conscious that I work with a group of people who are very supportive, very comfortable. They're totally committed to building a very diverse, very inclusive community here. I would say be as out on the application form as you're personally comfortable with. You will notice that we do specifically ask the question of whether you want to be in contact with the Out in Business group. And that's specifically so that we can invite you to webinars and events like this. It's not necessarily making a statement about your sexuality. You may be identifying as an ally and interested at that level. But there's quite a lot of other instances. We ask you to talk about your community involvement, what you do in your spare time. There's really space within the application form to talk about, maybe about your partner, how they're responding to the possibility, the potential that you'll be studying at LBS. So all of those kind of touch points, if we call you for interview, be as out as you're comfortable with being. But that being said, be aware that if we call you for interview, we are going to be sharing your application form and your essays with the alum who will be interviewing you. And if you're working, or if you're based somewhere where culturally you might find that difficult, it might be that you're working in the finance sector somewhere where it's very small, very tight knit, and you're not comfortable with detail, facts about your sexuality to be known to people outside just the LBS admissions teams. And if that's the case, that's absolutely fine. I would say that in that instance, and how we resolved it in that case, was saying, leave that information out of the application form, but be totally comfortable with emailing it kind of offline, if you like, to somebody in the admissions teams. So it's there in front of the people who need to know it, but it's not being exposed to people who don't. Yeah. Does that make sense to you guys? Okay, let me just check this question. Okay, Biamba would like to be heavily involved in the Out in Business Club. Well, we're very much in favour of that.
I already love you, baby.
Yeah. So how many offices does the club have? And how do people go about becoming involved and becoming an exec member?
We have 15 officers in the club, and in terms of how people go about actually becoming a member, we have an election process. So our presidents are elected in the spring of every year.
Sorry, I was just saying, if we go back one, what you're seeing on the screen now is our email link. So do you want to leave that up for a couple of minutes,
absolutely.
just to give you some links here? Yes, sorry, Allie.
So we, in terms of how people are selected for the club, we have an election in the spring of every year of kids who are doing the 2-year program, and that's to become the president for the following year. And for all new students, we have elections happen in September. Students write a platform, and they are interviewed and then selected by the current presidents. So the kinds of positions that we have, like we have a position like SIFs, that's the partnership chair. A lot of the work, particularly in the fall for the club, is all around Year Out, the planning and execution of the conference, as well as some of those recruiting events, and of course some socials. And the spring semester is really almost completely socials focused, creating events like within the club and all the partner events that we do across the school.
Great. So how welcome are non-LGBT people at Out in Business events? You've touched on this quite a lot, but perhaps go back to that point.
They're very welcome. We have, I would say, probably at most of the events we do, for example, we talked earlier about Coming Out Week, where we had students giving out the stickers and standing up and telling their stories. At the end of that week, we do a big event at a gay club in London, Soho. This is different than the White Party. It's a much more casual event, but we've had this year probably 150 students come out. I would say only like 40 of us were LGBT+. So the ally community is really active. We have in addition to all of those positions on the executive committee, we also have an ally chair, who this year is represented by a student who is involved in the marriage equality vote as a full-time job back in Australia. So we really, across all the activity that we do, we have allies pretty heavily involved and in the conversation.
Yeah.
Okay, so again, you gave sorry, everybody, we lost the connection there for a minute. So you touched on this a bit along the way, but just to give people a sense of how easy it is to get into the kind of broader gay scene in London beyond LBS.
Yeah, so I mean, this is dependent on how much time you have, and there's some weeks where it's quite busy, and so you might prefer to be on campus and have a casual drink with with people from the club or other clubs in the school, but especially at the beginning of the fall semester, and also as Ali said, in the spring, there's so many parties happening, and we oftentimes, basically what we do is a couple of us will share an event that's happening in London on one of the group chats that we have on WhatsApp, and then a little group of us will go to a specific event in different clubs in Soho or else. So it's really, really easy, and you'll find that we also have links, we didn't mention this, but with Interbank as well, which is a sort of social network of people in finance in London, and they organize drinks quite often. So we also join them. So there's many opportunities. Again, it's dependent on the free time and on your will to get out of the Baker Street bubble. But it's actually quite refreshing sometimes to get out of
Yes.
the two campuses and see what's beyond that.
The biggest challenge, I think, always at LBS is like, obviously you're here to study.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, just as gentle reminder that. But people who are looking for a job, obviously are spending a lot of time in that bit. There's a massive amount going on campus.
Yeah.
In terms of speaker events, social events, conferences, the whole thing. But like Siffrein said, we think of ourselves as a Baker Street bubble. You can actually spend your entire life in LBS, and actually there's a whole city outside, not just in terms of the gay scene, but also culturally, all of those things. And I think people get the most out of their studies here, who create a good balance between all those opportunities.
And I should add too that I guess we've kind of said this, but that we do through the club have relationships with a lot of different kinds of LGBT organizations around the city. So like, for example, there's an organization like Interbank for the tech space called Out in Tech, and often groups of students will go to their events. There's an organization called LB Women of all lesbian, bi, and trans female identifying leaders, and they will hold they hold almost monthly events. I'm going to an event that they're hosting at the House of Commons in 2 weeks. So there's an opportunity to really build connections throughout the London LGBT community as well. But it's all about keeping that balance.
Great question from Mark, which I'm going to hold back as our wrap-up question. But just a fact-based one. What's this year's Year Out date?
Year Out will happen this year in mid-November, so November 15 and 16.
Already looking forward to it. Already put the time in my diary.
Oh, yeah.
And when do we know yet when Reaching Out MBA Romba is this year? Where and when?
So it will happen on October 10 to 12, I believe, and it will be in Atlanta. So they have the website and you can look it up.
And typically about 5 to 10 people have gone from the club, with some support from the club as well, which is another really good event. So, wrap-up question from Mark is, what are some of the areas you'd like to see Out in Business grow and develop in the future? It's a bit of blue sky thinking.
Yeah, that's a really good question, Mark. I mean, overall, we would just like to see the absolute number of members grow in terms of not only LGBT members, but also ally members. As many of us as they are. Obviously, that's one of the things we would love to see. But I think there's three major trends actually that we would like to see. The first one will be just more diversity in general, and that will be through probably female representation in the club, probably just diversity in terms of geographic areas. Probably if you could get more people from Africa, Asia, and historically the school is incredibly international, and that's one of the biggest benefits of being here. You feel like you're just surrounded by the whole world, but it's been historically mainly European and American, although obviously that's not generalized. But so if we could have more people from these areas, that would be great. And in general, just building more bridges with the ally communities. And this year at Yura, we had ally speakers, which was really great, because that's what it's about. It's not about just, obviously it is about having events within our own community, but it's also about how do we fit in within the wider world. So essentially having a more active role for allies and creating more of these events in the future would be the dream.
Can I throw in one? I think one thing that's really important is that we definitely want to up our game on trans inclusion. We've certainly, I think, created a comfortable environment, but I think we can certainly up a gear on that. I mean, the trans representation at Year Out was definitely so much stronger. But I think not just the club, the school in general, and society in general has to be that more trans welcome.
And one little anecdote on that, and going into the whole non-binary question. Actually, in one of our campuses, we now have gender-neutral bathrooms, which I think is a little detail that testifies to the the extent to which the school is dedicated to these issues and to the well-being of every student.
And in the application form this year, after some technical hiccups, we this year committed to allowing people to gender identify in the application process. So we're not basing all our process purely on legal gender identity. We create more space in that. Good. Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Anything from you, Steph?
I mean, I would just briefly say that Out in Business has been one of the most fulfilling experiences I've had so far, and I've really found not only amazing people that are very smart and driven, but also warm and have become some of my closest friends, like Allie here today. And not only students, but also faculty members and staff, and Peter and everyone they have all been so supportive. So it's been one of the major parts of my experience with RBS so far, and I've really embraced it and would recommend it to any LGBTQ plus and ally applicants. But just thank you for tuning in today, and again, do feel free to reach out at our address. The email is oib@london.edu, and we reply very, very quickly. So do reach out.
Good. Just to echo what Siffrein said, if you're considering applying, we really want to encourage you to. If you've already applied, we wish you success with your application. And if you've already got a place, accept it and come and join us.
And I just to close, I really can't reiterate enough, as Siffrein said, this joining Out in Business, I'm involved in other clubs on campus and also on the executive committee of the LATAM Club. But I can say without a doubt that Out in Business has been the best part of my London Business School experience. The kinds of connections and relationships I've made in our club, like Sif saying, like through the administration, with people like Peter with the dean's office, have been incredible. From a career perspective, it's been amazing. From a leadership development perspective and team building perspective, just outstanding. And I cannot recommend it enough. So please do feel free to be in touch with us. We personally respond to the emails, starting with Sif and at oib@london.edu. And we look forward to hopefully seeing you guys on campus.
Great. Thanks to Siffrein. Thanks to Allie. Thanks to Sky and Antoine, who've been in the background being our excellent technical team. Thank you all very much for dialing in, and good afternoon.